One of the more interesting phenomena that is currently afoot in the glorious year of our Lord 2022 is the, for lack of a better phrase, gradual awakening of the normies, as it were. Which is to say, more and more people are beginning to realize that things aren't as peachy keen as we're told they are. But the most interesting aspect of this is that most of the people who recognize this are not really afflicted, as a rule, by the issues that they typically are blind to. And so it was not but a while ago that I encountered a video by one Chris Williamson, aka Chad Williamson. And Chad Williamson has a channel on YouTube, and he occasionally talks about red pill content. Is he a normie? Absolutely. Is he completely blue pill, as they would say? Probably not. But sometimes he talks about these topics, such as human psychology and male-female relations and the whole gambit, in fact. Or in some cases, the so-called red pill, which is basically what we are going to listen to in a bit, because he had a guy on. The guy's called Hamza, the Lord of the Bathrobe. Hamza has a fabulous collection of bathrobes, and I sincerely hope that he sells bathrobe merch, maybe red pill robes. That would be a suggestion. So if you're watching this, Hamza, red pill robes, that's an idea for some merch. But in any event, he had him on, which is very odd to my mind, and they talked about the red pill and so on and so forth. But towards the very last bit of the conversation, they started talking about the current state of men and where they all are. And some of the things that were said were mildly interesting, because some of it echoes thoughts that I've had in the past, and some of it reflects things that I've said publicly over the years, in fact, far preceding the current year. And so let's have a listen to this, and after that, we can talk about the details and what is wrong about what they said and what is right, and so on and so forth.
I've tried to wrap my mind around the potential solution to all this, and I can't think of any good answers whatsoever. And the only one that comes to mind is things keep going the way that they are, and instead of the bottom 80% of sexless, intimacy, love-deprived men revolting, they all just get consumed by the metaverse, and that's their new reality, and they find a sense of like love and I'm being deadly serious. I think that's actually the most realistic scenarios. A few years from now, we have like ultra realistic sort of like virtual reality, and guys are just trading an hour of cuddling for like 0.1 Ethereum, and that'll do them.
Dude, well, I mean, you'll see this in your YouTube comments. I've definitely seen it in some of the red pill videos that I've done, where guys will say, the more MGTOWy black pill guys will say, don't need to bother with women, just wait for the sex robots and buy cars in the meantime. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, it's a solution. It's not, I wouldn't say it's an optimal solution. It's not the one that I would choose, but I understand the compulsion of a guy who feels like he can't get physical intimacy or find a woman or a wife that cares about him. I understand why that would be attractive. And maybe you're right. Maybe the second best option, if revolt is the worst option, maybe the second best option is sedation. If you sedate the populace with enough metaverse and virtual reality and convenience to the point where men genuinely don't care about mating anymore. But even that, man, like, I can't imagine me being that guy. That's not the sort of life that I want. And again, I understand that not everybody has the same life experiences, but like, did you really want to grow up for this to be the pinnacle of your life?
To be honest, I feel like the sedation has been happening for many, many years. Video games, porn, social media. I think the majority of guys are so consumed in this technology that they wouldn't ever revolt. And life is like good enough for the majority of guys, and the things that they miss from real life, like a sense of brotherhood, status, and recognition, they're getting in games like Call of Duty. The things that they miss in the dating and sexual market, because they're not part of the 20% of guys who are like allowed to get that stuff, they get from like, I don't know, TV shows and porn and just fantasies and send dick pics on Instagram. So although it doesn't essentially fulfill the exact need, the thing is, the businesses that sedate a person and make them feel like somewhat like they've ticked off those bottom pillars of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those industries are like billions, like hundreds of billions, because that's where billions of men are going to. And to be honest, you were saying like you couldn't imagine a life like this. That made me realize, okay, usually if I do see those comments of like the men saying men going their own way and black pill, usually I'm instantly like, okay, you're a loser. Like, I don't know why you're doing that. Just, focus on self-improvement and everything. But lately, because of your podcast, I've been thinking more about this, and I've been thinking, are men like you and I living our life through the lens of someone who isn't this sounds horrible, like genetically sort of subpar? And that's why we're saying things like, oh, I wouldn't want to live that life. But it's like, we're tall, attractive guys. We've got like these good features and everything. We couldn't imagine a life like that. But what about for the guy? We couldn't imagine a life like that, even if, things were worse off, because we'd be, okay, let's still get the six pack, get the money and everything. But what about the guy who's like literally 5'7", unattractive face?
So when we talk about a quote unquote normie awakening, or in this case, a Chad awakening, in the case of Chad Williamson, listen to what he says initially. I can't imagine that life for myself. And this is what I mean. There are people who exist in fundamentally different realities. They're not the same reality all the time. So, for example, you could be a professor of mathematics at Princeton, and even though you're not Chad Thunderschlong, you're still existing in a different reality from somebody who's working a forklift in a warehouse for obvious reasons. But in terms of the basic necessities, let's have an overview of Chad Williamson. Chad Williamson came to prominence because he was on a show called Love Island, which is basically a show where people screw each other left and right, and it's for the sake of the entertainment of the audience. He is pretty much a Chad. He owns or oversees multiple nightclubs, and he has money. And so he's always had these things that your average guy tends to pine for and wishes he had. But fundamentally, through his conversations, he's come to the realization that maybe, just maybe, not everyone is in the same situation. Sometimes you have to laugh about that, of course, because it somehow resembles something along the lines of, by the gods, people are actually different. Some people are shorter and taller. Some people like eating pizza and some people don't. Wow, people are different. People aren't like me. That's what it really sounds like, right? People aren't like me. By gosh darn it, golly, I can't believe it. People aren't like me, which he sort of admits. But this basically reflects something I've talked about many times over the years, the problem of self-extrapolation. Most people extrapolate information, interpret the world based on themselves for obvious reasons. And as a consequence, they end up with a bit of tunnel vision. So yes, he initially makes some concessions. Well, I know not everyone has the same experience. What he really means is not everyone has the same genes and environment as he had, maybe. Not everyone is a Chad. Not everyone is good looking. Not everyone is wealthy. That's what he means. He admits that, but then he says, I still can't believe it. So even after admitting it, he still thinks, I can't believe people aren't exactly like me. Wow. He can't believe that people aren't like him. And so he had the Lord of the Bathrobe on, as you can hear. And the Lord of the Bathrobe talks about some points, things I've talked about as well, by the way, about this concept of sedation, for example, that increasingly, for years now, we've been in a state of sedation, collectively. And in particular, this is the case for young men. And these are things that I've said in previous videos, no rebellion, etc., etc. There isn't going to be some grand rebellion because people are too sedated. And credit where it's due, the Lord of the Bathrobe is correct. Things are kind of good enough on some level. On some level, the basic subsistence that people require, particularly men, young men, it's kind of there. He's not incorrect about that. And there will be an acceleration of this. I've talked about this, people getting fully plugged into full immersion VR. I think that's where it will have to go on some level because the alternative is unthinkable. Yes, sometimes people have talked about things like polygyny, but that hasn't worked out very well historically and doesn't work out in societies which maintain it. And so, at least they're talking about this stuff. Now, to be frank, I don't think Hamza is anywhere on Chad Williamson's level. Hamza is not a Chad, he doesn't look like one, but he's sort of puffing himself up and saying things such as, well, not every guy is like us, right? But here's the thing. All of that is true, right? And would be true if they just left it at that. If the Lord of the Bathrobe said, well, sedation, the metaverse, blah, 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 this is the future, this is what's going on, so be it. And herein lies the paradox, gentlemen, because there always is a paradox and a contradiction. It's human nature, right? The problem, fundamentally, is that a guy like Hamza, Lord of the Bathrobe, sees this, offers, I believe, an accurate analysis of what's going on, but then comes at you and claims it's not the case. Well, how does he do that? They talk about the 80-20 rule. They talk about the top 20% of men. And Hamza would have you believe that, in fact, despite these staggering odds, you still have a chance. Matter of fact, throughout the conversation between the two gentlemen, they keep on emphasizing how all it takes is a little. If you just go to the gym, you'll be so different from everybody else, because nobody else goes to the gym, allegedly. You'll be so different. If you just lose a little fat, you'll be so different. If you just do this, you'll be so different. At the same time, in the same breath, they'll say the 80-20 rule. Only 20% of the top men will get it. So which is it, gentlemen? Which is it? Is it that anyone can be part of the 20%, and so effectively vitiating that ratio by claiming all you need to do is go to the gym? All you need to do is pump a little bit of iron, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of this. Or is it that men are forlorn and without hope, etc., etc.? Which is it? You can't really get a straight answer, but Hamza does have an answer. And his answer is, of course, self-improvement guruism. So he's contradicting himself, constantly talking about competition, but then proselytizing to people. And by the way, in that talk, he described himself as a cult leader. A morally aligned cult leader, yes, but a cult leader nonetheless. And therein lies the problem. He's not doing it for the sake of generosity, as we can see. Gentlemen, look at the screen. Do you really think it's worth $1,000 to speak with some rando online for an hour? Sure, I guess if you have money to burn, why not? But the reality is that the vast majority of the guys watching him are probably poor, don't have the means, and so therefore it's likely a marketing gimmick. But nonetheless, bear in mind that it takes a certain type of ego. I would dare say it takes a certain kind of charlatanism to demand of people that they pay that amount of money simply to speak with you. Now, it'd be different if we were talking about, I don't know, a giant merger and acquisition, such as the sort that we've witnessed with Microsoft acquiring Activision. I'm not going to talk about that here. Yeah, you have lawyers involved, you have people involved, and so charging $1,000 an hour makes sense. These are professionals. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. But if you're talking about your average Joe, a schlump, if you will, well, is he going to have that money? And if he does have that money, is that money worth spending on some guy who purports to be a guru who's going to help you out of your problems? I mean, Hamza is very skilled at this, by the way. He talks about holding people accountable. He has accountability services to hold people accountable, right? But as I've said several times, the question is the juice worth the squeeze? Which is it? Can everyone distinguish himself and rise to become an alpha simply by going to the gym and dressing differently and making a bit of money? In which case everything's game and everyone can achieve everything. And so the 80-20 rule is therefore negated and not relevant or not true. Or is it that some guys are absolutely lost? I don't know which it is, because, frankly speaking, for somebody like the Lord of the Bathrobe to clarify that would be detrimental to his business model. And I say enough of these shenanigans. A lot of people think I'm trying to peddle hopelessness. No, I'm saying take the blinders off. There's a famous scene that I can tell you about from a novel I used to enjoy reading when I was a kid or a young teenager. And the scene is the following. These guys are in a situation, a war-torn land, if you will. And there's a scenario where they're talking about hope. And the leader of this ragtag band asks, what should we do? We need to keep on hoping. We need to keep on going. And he says, no. Hope is the denial of reality. It is the carrot dangled before the draft horse to keep him plodding along in a vain attempt to reach it. And the leader asks him, are you saying we shouldn't hope? To that, Raceland Magir, that is, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, for those of you who don't know, to that he says, I'm saying we should remove the carrot and walk forward with our eyes open. That is our reality, gentlemen. We can pretend that it's not, but it is this reality. The things that the Lord of the Bathrobe said in the beginning are on point. Sedation seems to be possibly the only solution, and the alternatives seem few and far between. There might be things such as geomaxing, doing this and that. But The question I'm trying to answer, and I'm failing at answering because it is a bloody difficult question, is how does one live a content life in the current meta, in this horrible, horrible existence we have in the year 2022? From top to bottom, it's not just about looks and women, it's about everything. Everything is hidden underneath this disgusting veneer of progress and technology, of contentment, of happiness. Everything is going well, apart from the pestilence, apart from depression, apart from people offing themselves, apart from all this stuff, these problems that have become ever more prominent and exacerbated with time. So we can all sit back and pretend that the veneer actually works, when it is, frankly speaking, bloody transparent. Anyone with 2 brain cells can see that something is rotten in the kingdom of Denmark, and yet we're pretending that the kingdom is doing fine. And in comes our salvation, right? Do you know, gentlemen, 2,000 years ago, around the time of the alleged Jesus Christ, there were all sorts of charlatans running around peddling salvation to people. It's well documented in Roman writings. People claiming this or that, claiming that they were the son of a god, chosen of the gods. And in this time of despair and hopelessness, see, emphasis on the word hopelessness, people would turn to them. They would follow them. They would give away their goods and possessions. And why? Well, humans do have a hankering for hope. It's kind of normal. But at the same time, as Raistlin Majir so eloquently explained to us, it is a denial of reality. There needs to be some probability of success. Whatever you do, even if it's playing the lotto, some people really, really think they're going to beat the odds. Pity for them. But around this time, roughly 2,000 years ago, there are all sorts of people running around claiming all sorts of things and how they could help people. What does that sound like to you? Gee golly, does it sound like, some of these red pill gurus, some of these guys who are offering their help, trying to save you? Does it sound like $1,000 a pop to talk to somebody, some rando online for an hour, for sage wisdom and advice, to hold you accountable? It's no different. And guess what? He'll save you. He will hold you accountable. All you need to do is part ways with your wallet. And not just part ways with your wallet, part ways with everything you have, because at those prices, he better be delivering salvation. I think we can all agree on that. The Chads are awakening. Although Hamza is not a Chad, Chad Williamson is. But Chad Williamson does his own thing because he exists in his own reality. He can't imagine it for himself, and so he never will. He will always have this other reality. For other people who are, shall we say, transient passengers into the world of Chad, who travel back and forth between the dimensions, people such as Hamza, well, they have a different plan in store. They want to sell you salvation. And it's very, very expensive salvation. And they have the answers. But they also acknowledge that everything is screwed. But they also have the answers. Which is it? How is this fundamentally different from any of the many religious hucksters that have populated the history of humanity over the many millennia? This is just the latest iteration of it, gentlemen. We're living in hopeless times. Well, someone comes around and is going to sell you hope and tell you what to do with your life and enrich themselves in the process. Now, to be fair, it could just be that a guy like Hamza is a megalomaniac. In fact, as he refers to himself as a cult leader, he probably is on some level, because to assume that kind of personality and to project it into the world implies a sense of narcissism and a sense of megalomania. There's no question about that. But even granting that, it's just outright predatory to demand prices of people who are struggling, by the way. The people who watch him are struggling, right, with their finances. They're struggling to get by, and the way he helps them with their struggle is by significantly emptying out their wallets, all the while telling them that they can. They're like little trains that could. You can do it. But wait a second. Not everyone can do it. They're still at upper 20%. There's the contradiction again. It just doesn't work. You can sell hope on a stick, and people will buy it. I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the years to come. People selling hope on a stick for exorbitant prices, and maybe lots of people biting because people are that desperate. Do I have all the answers? No, I don't. But I'm looking for some that are reasonable, that don't fly in the face of reality. And guess what? You don't need to pay $1,000 to hear me say this stuff, for the record. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Please hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, share the video. If I am still alive, I will check you out later. May the gods very much watch over you. Take care. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.